Okay, thank you, everybody. Guess it's good afternoon for all of you. It's good to see you, and thank you for this opportunity to kind of talk to you. I want to kind of share with you information about the MD PhD career pathway, as well as information about the admissions process and kind of how to begin preparing or thinking about this as a potential career option for you. Let me give you a little bit of introduction to myself, and then I'll kind of go through some slides that I've prepared. I am a professor of laboratory medicine and pathology at the University of Minnesota Medical School in Minneapolis. Um, I am a basic scientist. My research interest is in immunology, um, and I'm interested in studying the T cell immune response to infections as well as to cancer. And I have been director of the MD PhD program here at the University of Minnesota since 2010. And our program is about 77 students currently in the program who are in various stages of training to pursue an MD PhD. So let me share my slides and then kind of go through this information with you. Where I currently am, it's a little challenging for me to kind of see the chat, so hopefully somebody can monitor that for me. But if you have any questions while we go through this presentation, please just interrupt me or put something in the chat, and we'll answer it there. But hopefully there'll be time at the end of the session to or end the presentation to also kind of engage in discussion and answer any and all questions that you might have. So let's see, let's get started. MD PhD. Okay, so I guess a big question is like why do this and why pursue this kind of career path? So one is this is a very unique career path. It's one that combines clinical medicine, the interest in taking care of patients, with the discovery and application of new knowledge. That combination is kind of unique and can give you both local as well as a global impact on medicine and science. And what I mean by that essentially is that with a clinical career in which you are seeing patients in a clinic as a doctor, as a physician, that's where you can have a local impact on the health of your patients. And that's obviously very important. But you can only see so many patients in any given day or in any given week. And so research actually gives you the opportunity to kind of change the paradigm by which patients are taken care of on a global level, right? So every physician, for example, might be changing their standard practice of care, standard of care, based on research discoveries that are made in the research laboratory by physician scientists. So that's where the global impact kind of comes in. It's that combination of having that direct patient care experience along with the impact that research can have globally that is attractive to a lot of individuals who are pursuing MD PhD careers. Formal MD PhD training programs are very good at sort of effectively integrating scientific education as well as medical education so that you can get both research training with your PhD as well as medical training with your MD. In particular, the formal training during the PhD years is really critical for developing your skills as a research scientist. And so that's I think, one particular advantage of a formal MD PhD program. There's also very strong communities of physician scientists. This is not a very large community in general. So, for example, in the admissions process, generally there are about 2,000 applicants that kind of pursue or apply to programs, and roughly about 700 spots nationally for entering MD PhD students. So it's not a huge community, but it's a very cohesive community. And nationally, there's a lot of there are organizations that bring physician scientists together. There are organizations that bring MD PhD program directors together. So there's a strong kind of national push for promoting the success and career development of physician scientists. And finally, there's a real strong national need for more physician scientists at academic medical centers. Every, I think, academic medical center is seeking individuals who can have expertise in clinical medicine and taking care of patients, as well as having research skills that allow them to run research programs and research labs. So there's a strong demand, I think, for physician scientists at academic medical centers across the country. All right, so there are about 100, I would say, MD PhD programs across the country in the US, and about a little more than half of those are funded by the National Institutes of Health through a program that's called the Medical Scientist Training Program, or the MSTP. And so you may encounter, if you look at MD PhD programs, you will find programs referred to as MD PhD programs, but also programs referred to as MSTPs. And MSTPs are basically programs that are funded through this NIH mechanism. This is a mechanism in which programs have to get reviewed essentially every 5 years and meet certain standards and expectations that have been established by the NIH for high quality MD PhD training. This is the goal statement of the NIH with regard to MSTPs, right? So the goal of the MSTP is to develop a diverse pool of highly trained clinician scientist leaders available to meet the nation's biomedical research needs. And with the dual qualification of rigorous scientific research and clinical practice, graduates will be equipped with the skills to develop research programs that accelerate the translation of research advances to the understanding, detection, and treatment of human disease, and to lead the advancement of biomedical research, right? So the word that you see throughout this mission statement or this goal statement is research, right? Research is everywhere embedded within the goals of this program. So it's really a program that's designed to train individuals who are going to use research as kind of their foundational kind of approach to improving the health and well-being of patients. So it's a research-focused and research-intensive career path that we're talking about with MD PhD. All right, so there are lots of ways to, if you're excited about research and you're passionate about research, there are multiple ways by which you can pursue a research career, and MD PhD is just one of them. So this slide basically kind of compares the kind of different pathways, right? So a PhD, obtaining a PhD is a pathway in which you are basically trained to kind of discover new knowledge. Generally takes about 5 to 6 years to complete, and PhD programs will typically provide you with a stipend and pay for your tuition and health insurance and all those other kinds of things. You can also be a research-intensive physician by going to medical school. Medical school is typically 4 years. But the primary focus of medical training is really to apply existing knowledge, existing and new knowledge to patients. So it is possible to get some research training by going to medical school, but that typically happens after you complete your medical degree and you go on to research, to residency and fellowship. Unlike PhD training, typically you have to get a scholarship, or you have to have some financial aid, or you have to pay out of your own pocket and your own expenses the significant cost that's associated with going to medical school. And the primary career path is clinical practice. So MD PhD tries to combine these two together, right? So that you get training in how to discover new things and new knowledge, and also how to apply existing and new knowledge to patients. So you combine these two together, we get about an 8-year program, but MD PhD programs are more like PhD programs in the sense that you receive a stipend for your living expenses, your tuition, and for both medical school and graduate school is covered. We provide health insurance as well. And most of the career paths for MD PhDs are interested primarily in going into academic medicine, becoming faculty members at medical schools, although we are seeing more MD PhD graduates interested in, for example, in careers in industry as well, where they can continue to do research, but also potentially also continue to see patients. So, so that's kind of the kind of differences that exist there. All right, so I'm going to use our program as an example of kind of things to be thinking about or what to know about in terms of MD PhD training in general. And I think in general, this will give you a sense of kind of what to look for or what you should expect if you decide to kind of pursue MD PhD training, right? So a quick kind of overview of the University of Minnesota. We're one of the nation's top research universities. We have what's called a comprehensive academic health center, which means we have all of the health professional schools on one campus. We have a medical school, dental school, public health, pharmacy, nursing, and College of Veterinary Medicine. And so that provides a lot of really unique opportunities for interdisciplinary collaboration. We have university leadership that's focused on discovery and scholarship. Our university president is actually a physician. Our dean of the medical school is a physician scientist, MD, PhD. who has an active research laboratory. We are the only medical school in the Twin Cities. The Twin Cities area is a population of about 3.5 million people. And our medical students get to do clinical training and clinical sites all over our Twin Cities metropolitan area, as well as outside of the Twin Cities area. We have outstanding research faculty, very successful in obtaining research awards, and we have a very collaborative collegial research environment that's focused on graduate education and training. And we have a clinical and translational science institute that's funded by our NIH CTSA grant. All right, so that's kind of an overview of the university itself. In terms of our own program, our mission is really to train and support a diverse community of dedicated students to become physician scientists who are able to integrate their scientific, clinical, and leadership skills to promote human health. And we are supported by one of these NIH MSTP T32 training grants and have been supported by that mechanism since 1988. All right, so I'm going to take you through a couple of the kind of key features of our program, and we'll start with the fact that the program is integrated as well as flexible, allowing for some individualization of training pathways. So this is a schematic of the overall kind of 7 to 8 year training timeline. And our program basically follows what's referred to within our community as kind of a 2-4-2 kind of training model. So generally the first year and a half of our training program is primarily MD focused, where you complete the preclinical MD courses. You can do an optional clinical clerkship as well. But during this time period, you also will do research rotations like a PhD student would do. And we have weekly meetings with our first and second year students. During the last 6 months of the second year of training, there's dedicated time for you to do research, to get into your PhD lab and begin starting with your PhD research. And so that allows you to transition into the PhD phase, in which you will join one of 11 different graduate programs. You'll complete some PhD courses, typically in the first year of that PhD phase, and then complete the rest of your PhD research. But even during this time, you will have opportunities to do clinical work. We have a very structured, formal kind of clinical program that will keep you connected with clinical medicine during the PhD years, so that by the time you transition back to medical school at the last 2 years of training, you will be able to, you'll be ready to kind of excel in your medical school clinical clerkships. So you'll complete the PhD, transition back to medical school. Even during the medical school phase here at the end, you will have time to do additional research if you'd like as well. So you can see here that there's a lot of integration of medicine and science throughout the training. You get early engagement with research in our program because you start your research rotations actually before medical school begins in that first year. Again, this dedicated period of time to begin PhD research is critical to allow you to kind of transition effectively into the PhD phase. And then we have this clinical program, which we call clinical continuity and mentoring during the PhD phase as well. Right. And in each of those different phases, there are opportunities for kind of individualizing some of the training based on your own specific needs and your goals. A third thing is that we have a broad array of research opportunities. As I mentioned, we have 11 different graduate programs that we work with. So our students will choose to pursue their PhD in one of these different graduate programs. So these include kind of the core biomedical sciences graduate programs like biochemistry and physiology and immunology, genetics, neuroscience, pharmacology. But we also offer opportunities for students to pursue a PhD in biomedical engineering, in medicinal chemistry, bioinformatics, and computational biology, and 2 PhD options in our School of Public Health and Epidemiology, Health Services Research Policy and Administration. So we try and take advantage of the breadth of research that exists at the University of Minnesota to give our MD PhD students opportunities to pursue PhD training in a wide variety of disciplinary areas. A fourth component of our program is our commitment to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We have a very active, what we call a JEDI committee, as well as a Women in Science and Medicine committee. They have started a very active pre-MSTP undergraduate mentoring program in which current students are paired with mentees or individuals who are working towards applying to MD PhD programs. We have a number of initiatives and programming that are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We started a Leadership and Diversity Fellowship program, and this is our current student cohort of 77 students. 51% identify as women, 35% from groups that are underrepresented in science and medicine, and 59% BIPOC. The fifth component is really community. This is a long program. So it takes, 7 to 8 years to complete. And it's important for your success as well as the success of other students in our program to have a very, very strong community. So we work hard to give you opportunities to develop leadership skills through peer mentoring and student-led organizations and program activities. Our students are actively involved in our admissions and recruiting process. They organize monthly meetings, our annual retreat, a number of different volunteer events and social activities as well are organized by our students. So this is an important component of success for physician scientists. It's a very collaborative and collegial group of students. We value and promote collective as well as personal success. And I know oftentimes we get questions about whether it's possible to do other things while you're pursuing both the MD and the PhD, and that's definitely true. We have students who are doing lots of other things outside of the lab and outside of the clinic that enrich their life and as well promote their success within our program. And then finally, there's a lot of academic, professional, and personal support. So this is also very important. We provide, for example, grant writing support, and we have a very outstanding track record of obtaining external fellowships with a high success rate, about 70%. Our students, on average, publish about 3 total first author papers and just a little over 6 total co-authored papers. And we have a lot of active personalized mentorship and professional development that begins at the start of your training, continues throughout your experience within our program, up to and including residency training plans as you move forward after you complete your MD PhD. All right, so this is a segue into kind of what actually happens after you complete your MD PhD. And so most of our graduates, almost all of our graduates actually, are moving on to complete residency and fellowship, potentially a postdoc. So this is a pathway that medical students, for example, pursue, is to get additional clinical training in a particular clinical area, and then to get some additional research training as well. And so this is the pathway by which an MD PhD graduate can go on to ultimately become a faculty member at a medical school. So that's the fairly common kind of pathway that exists. But we are seeing other students who, for example, will move directly into the workforce, for example, maybe perhaps move into a job in industry, or we have other graduates who will go on to do an academic postdoc, more typical of what a PhD student might do. These are individuals who basically have decided that they're not going to continue on with clinical care, but want to kind of focus their energies on the research side of their career. So that's another pathway that exists as well. And if you're interested in kind of the different types of clinical specialties that MD PhD graduates pursue, that's shown here on the right side of this slide, and you can see it's a wide array of different clinical specialties that MD PhD graduates pursue, but most of them will pursue, for example, training in internal medicine or pathology or pediatrics, surgery, neurology, psychiatry, kind of some of those more common areas. But again, the opportunity exists for you to pursue clinical training in a variety of different clinical specialties as an MD PhD graduate. All right, so that tells you a little bit about the program itself and kind of the training. I want to switch gears a little bit and kind of talk about the application process and kind of what's involved in that and what to be thinking about if you decide, in fact, that this is something that you want to pursue. And I guess the first message to convey to you about the application process is that it's long. It takes a long time. So generally about 10 months from the time that you apply to MD PhD training and the time that you start. So in terms of the actual calendar year, for example, typically the application system will open up in June. You will apply during that time period, and most programs will start their training in either June or July or August of the following year. And so that entire kind of 10 to 12 month time period is associated with recruitment and admissions. So just kind of keep that in mind as you kind of think about, the timeline here. In terms of the components of an application, you will typically apply through the AMCAS system. So there's a common kind of portal that you will use to submit your application. You will need to provide demographic information. You will need to take the MCAT exam, provide academic transcripts. There will be opportunities for you to list and describe a variety of different experiences that you feel are important for an admissions committee to know about. that have prepared you for success as an MD PhD student. You will need to provide 3 personal statements for an MD PhD application, and then letters of recommendation. And the number of letters of recommendation will vary depending on the program, anywhere from 3 to maybe 5 or 6. Our program requires 4 letters of recommendation, for example. And the personal statements, let's see if I can get there. Let's see, we'll talk about the personal statements here. There's a personal statement about why you want to be a physician. Every medical school applicant will complete that personal statement. And there'll be 2 additional MD PhD specific personal statements. There'll be one about why do you want to pursue the MD PhD? It's a fairly short personal statement, and then a much longer research experience personal statement in which you talk about your research experiences. And both of those are for MD PhD applicants only. So things that we kind of look for within our program are sustained and independent research experience. We'll talk a little bit about what that means in the next slide, I think. Very strong academic performance, some well-written personal statements that convey not only your research expertise and your knowledge of the research that you've done, but also your knowledge of MD PhD training and your overall commitment to a physician scientist career. Exceptional letters of recommendation, and particularly from individuals that you've worked with in a research setting. So having letters from research mentors is really, really critical. Experience in caring for others, that you want to be a doctor, a commitment to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and extracurricular activities and other life experiences that contribute to your long-term care, your long-term well-being, and your long-term success. So that's important as well. Right? So what do we talk about when we're talking about sustained and independent research experience? I think the key here is really, have you had opportunities where you have spent sufficient time pursuing research opportunities to know for sure that research is a passion and something that you want to devote your career to? So there are a number of different ways by which you can obtain that kind of research experience. So for example, summer research programs, summer research opportunities is one mechanism. Doing research during your undergraduate years, during the academic year, things like a senior thesis research project or other kinds of research during the time that you're in school, or potentially pursuing full-time research after an undergraduate, after you complete your undergraduate degree. This is fairly common among applicants to MD PhD programs these days, to do some additional kind of gap year kind of experiences focused on getting more research experience. You want to be you want to have an experience in which you get some idea about how you go about testing a research hypothesis, right? So having an opportunity to have independence, having some intellectual ownership of your research project is really important and helpful in helping you determine whether research is something that you want to pursue. And then we get a lot of questions about productivity in terms of like, what do I need to be a competitive applicant? Do I need a paper? Do I need other kinds of things? This can be a little confusing, but I would say that if you have the opportunity to do presentations at either local meetings, regional meetings, or national meetings, those are often really helpful because those are opportunities for you to tell other people and give you the opportunity to kind of present your research to other individuals. Some applicants will have opportunities to get local funding for their work. For example, maybe a summer scholarship or some Europe funding or something like that. Where you have to submit a proposal and get funding through that mechanism. In terms of publications, this is really not required to be a competitive applicant. I think there's this assumption that only applicants who have published papers or have been a co-author on a paper are getting into MD PhD programs. That's really not true. We know that from an admissions perspective and from our perspective as a program, we know that oftentimes being a co-author on a paper is more you being in the right place at the right time and having some luck there, and not so much some indication of kind of necessarily the kind of the work that you put into that. So it's not required, but I will say that if you, for example, decide to pursue research full-time after college, for example, with multiple gap years pursuing full-time research, there might be more of an expectation that you would have some kind of outcome from that work, whether it's presentations at a conference or potentially co-authorship on a publication. So a lot of this is really dependent on kind of when you decide to apply. I think the expectations for research experiences are going to be a little different for someone who's applying as a senior, coming right out of college, versus someone who's spent a couple of years after college pursuing research. So it's something else to kind of keep in mind. Now, our medical school has a number of competencies that they look for entering University of Minnesota MD students. So these include things like academic readiness. That's the quality of the work that you've done academically. Your MCAT score, those kinds of things are kind of part of that academic readiness. Intellectual inquiry, that's really kind of focused on your curiosity and kind of your focus, particularly in the research realm. Do you have a service orientation? Do you have a growth mindset that will allow you to respond positively to challenges that you will encounter during your training and in your career? Cultural humility, the ability to kind of understand and appreciate diverse perspectives, empathy and compassion, ethical responsibility, critical thinking, and teamwork and leadership. Right? So these are kind of skills and attributes and competencies that that we're looking for in highly qualified applicants. All right, so after applying, really, the applications go through a kind of initial kind of screening process, and then a smaller number of applicants are invited to an interview. And the interview will typically either, I will say for MD, PhD, probably it's still predominantly virtual interviews that are taking place now at that stage. There will be some programs that will offer you an in-person interview, but again, it will depend on the program. In most of these cases, you will meet with faculty and students. You'll have some Q&A sessions, some social activities, other kinds of things associated with the interview. Again, depending on the program, you may interview with the MD component of the admissions committee process, or the MD PhD component of the process, or both, or just one, or just the MD PhD component. Again, it varies a lot from program to program, and that's something that you should be aware of, that the interview format and the process will differ from program to program. But once you go through that interview, if you receive an offer of admission, then you will be recruited essentially by all of these programs. So this will typically involve an in-person, what we call a second look or revisit opportunity, where you will go to campus, meet with additional faculty members and students, and that's really the time for the program to kind of do its best to convince you that that program is the best place for you to go. And you'll have additional follow-up conversations there. And ultimately, you will have to decide. This typically happens towards the end of April, beginning of May, in this process, about which program will be the best for you. And then you will start. And again, the start date varies from program to program, but in some programs, it starts as early as mid to late May. Our program starts in mid to late June, and other programs start in July or August. So again, for some programs, you may end up moving into and starting in that program pretty quickly after you make this decision about which program that you want to join. Okay, so what do you kind of need to look out for when you're thinking about these different MD, PhD programs? I think probably the most important thing is the research environment, right? So think about kind of, are there multiple faculty members that are conducting research that's of interest to you? And it's important that there be multiple faculty members, not just one. Because if you're like considering a program because there's this one special person that you want to do research with, you know, there's a fair amount of risk associated with doing that, because that faculty member may not be taking students during the time that you start in the program, or that faculty member may actually end up leaving that institution, or that faculty member maybe doesn't have the kind of lab culture and environment that you're really kind of looking for, and you don't really know that at the time that you make this decision. So it's important to have options, and those research options are really, really important. Think about the research funding that exists at institutions, what the facilities are like as well. The other environment that's important is about the training environment and the program environment, right? The curriculum, not only on the MD side, but also on the PhD side, is there a commitment to inclusive and culturally competent mentoring? What's the professional development support like? How do they build community? And what have the graduates done in the program? What's been their success? What have been the outcomes of those programs after they've completed their training? Location is important. It's you know, again, as I mentioned, this is a 7 to 8 year commitment that you're making to an institution, to a program, to a particular place. You want to be in a place where you will feel that you will be happy and successful for that period of time. And then many applicants will end up kind of making large spreadsheets and collecting data and trying to rank different programs. And ultimately, they may not know exactly where they want to go, but they sometimes just have this sense of like, this feels like the right place for me, and this feels like where I need to be. And it's important not to ignore those kinds of feelings. That I think you often have a gut sense of kind of what's going to work for you, what's not going to work for you, and that sense of belonging or fit is also an important consideration as you move forward. All right. Okay, so that's kind of the stuff that I wanted to present to you. The resources that I think you should be aware of is there is this resource from the AAMC, the American Association of American Medical Colleges. So they have a whole page associated with MD, PhD dual degree training. And there's a lot of interesting and important tools and resources that are available here. So you can learn about different MD, PhD programs. If you're interested, for example, in a particular kind of scientific area, for example, if you're interested in a PhD in public health, there's a list of the programs that offer a PhD in public health on this site. There's also a calendar. You can actually take a look at like when programs are interviewing and when the second looks are happening. Those are all being posted by MD, PhD programs. So there's a lot of great resources here that you can take advantage of to learn more about what MD, PhD training is all about, as well as what the application and interview process is like. I also encourage you to reach out to take a look at our website. All of the contact information for the students in our program are on the site. You are welcome to contact students if you have any questions. They are very committed to kind of helping students who want to pursue this pathway and providing information and kind of basically doing as much to kind of demystify this process as possible. And then my contact information is here. This email address is probably the best way to kind of reach me. And I'm happy to answer questions that you might have about MD, PhD training or about the interview and admissions process. So I think that's what I've got for you. And then, if you want to leave your contact information with us, you can basically use this QR code. We'll be happy to kind of touch base with you. But again, you can contact us at any time if you have any questions. So I'll leave this up for just a couple of minutes and then happy to kind of open it up for questions and discussion. So.
And we do have some questions in the chat ready for you when you're ready to get to them.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. So let's see what we've got here.
The first question that we have is, what is the difference between MSTP and a regular MD, PhD besides being NIH funded?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say there, in general these days, not a huge difference between NIH-funded MD, PhD programs and non-NIH funded MD, PhD programs. I think in general, the expectation is that MD, PhD programs, regardless of whether they're NIH-funded or not, should be providing a stipend and providing tuition support and those kinds of things, financial support for students. But I think if you're looking at a non-NIH funded MD, PhD program, it is important to ask those programs specifically what the financial support is for that program, provided by that program. So there may be some non-NIH funded programs where the financial support might be a little bit different than what you might see with an NIH-funded MD, PhD program. In an NIH-funded MD, PhD program, I think all of those, the expectation from the NIH is that the programs would be providing that kind of financial support. So I think that's the one place where you should pay attention to that. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And then the next question that we have is, do you offer pharmaceutical development or a similar program for PhD?
I think the closest that we would have would be our PhD in medicinal chemistry, where there's a lot of drug development research that's going on within that program. That's a graduate program in our School of Pharmacy. And then our molecular pharmacology and therapeutics graduate program also has investigators or faculty members who are involved in kind of drug development. And I would say that drug development in general or pharmaceutical development also exists in some of our other programs. For example, in our microbiology, immunology, and cancer biology program, there's a lot of work focused on cancer therapeutics. Those are both pharmaceutical kind of drug drug development opportunities, but also more kind of biological therapies, so cell therapies or kind of immunotherapies within that area as well. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And then we have another question, and this question is, if students have a lower overall GPA because of their associate's program, will that prevent them from being accepted if their GPA has improved in their bachelor's program?
I would say no. I think what programs are looking for is not only just the number, which is like the GPA, but I think all programs are looking at sort of trends over time. And so, you know, something that we often refer to as like what we call an upward trajectory in kind of academic performance over time is something that's taken into account by most programs, I would say, certainly by our program. So for example, we know that transition to college is not easy, and that maybe that freshman year was particularly challenging from an academic perspective. But if we see kind of improved academic performance over time, that's perceived as a very positive kind of outcome, I think, from in terms of your academic readiness, so your ability to kind of overcome those challenges that exist in that maybe happened earlier in your college career, to demonstrate that you can be successful in more academically rigorous and challenging upper level courses as you move through your undergraduate training is perceived to be pretty positive. So I would say that would not be something that I would necessarily kind of worry about. I think the other important message about the academic readiness component of an application is that if there are sort of, what's the best way to put this? If you feel that there are if you have concerns, for example, about your GPA or academic readiness or things like that, and there are reasons why the academic performance is what it is, it's important to make sure that the application reflects, or that the reviewer of the application knows what's going on. So oftentimes it's like one semester or one academic year that looked really unusual. There's in general, most of the time, some really legitimate reason for why that happened. But if you don't talk about it in your application, or if you don't mention it, then the reviewer or the program really can't make a good assessment about why that's happening. So it's important to be open about kind of the challenges that you faced, how you've addressed them, how you've overcome them, so that there's no guessing about, questions that programs might have. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And then our next question is, how much weight do MD, PhD summer programs hold at host schools and other schools?
Um, I think MD, PhD summer programs can be helpful in terms of giving you an opportunity to kind of work with physician scientists, work with MD, PhD students, learn more about what MD, PhD training is all about by kind of basically being part of that program for a summer. I don't think it's absolutely essential that you participate in a program like that. I think any summer research program that will allow you to kind of explore research opportunities to do independent research, kind of on a full-time basis for 10 weeks or so is going to be valuable for your MD, PhD training. So I don't know actually how programs kind of perceive if there's any kind of advantage, for example, for doing an MD, PhD program at a school that you're interested in or a program that you're interested in. I don't really know how programs kind of think about that, but that's kind of what I would suggest. So I think the summer programs are helpful in general. They don't have to be MD, PhD focused or MD, PhD specific. And even if you're in kind of a program that is not an MD, PhD specific summer program, in general, most of those institutions, you'll have an opportunity to kind of talk to MD, PhD students and talk to MD, PhD faculty, even if you're not in an MD, PhD focused summer program. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Yeah.
Thank you again. And then another student is expressing concerns over potential funding issues. For a student who is looking for funding, how would you kind of advise that?
Yeah, I think this is unfortunately a challenge for all of us in the scientific community. Um, I think currently, obviously, every institution is kind of maybe responding to these challenges a little bit differently, but I would say that programs, at least in this current application cycle, I don't know this for sure, but I would say most programs are probably making some adjustments in terms of like the overall class sizes that they're kind of trying to recruit. So for example, in our program, we typically recruit about 10 students a year within our program, but this cycle, because of some of the uncertainty that exists, we're recruiting 8 students per cycle, which is about a 20% reduction for us. So we hope that that's a temporary kind of thing that's just happening this cycle. But again, um, this is probably something that is being discussed or considered by lots of different programs. And so it's important for you to kind of ask those questions and kind of try and get that information from different individuals. Unfortunately, we are in a situation right now where we really don't know what the ultimate impact of these federal policy changes and these executive orders and potential changes in NIH funding are going to be. So I think every program is trying to navigate this as best as possible. But that's I wish I had more information for you in terms of exactly what's going on here, but fortunately we don't. And so that's it's just important to kind of ask those questions. Yeah, as we know, yeah,
Thank you for your help and the information that you are able to provide.
yeah.
And so another student asked, could you talk more about the work-life balance of the MST program? How much vacation time do students get per year? What extracurriculars are students typically involved in?
Yeah. So yeah, what's the best way to put it about work-life balance? I think students have students pursue that a little bit differently depending on the student. I think there's definitely opportunities, and most of our students are doing things outside of lab, outside of medicine or clinic that are important to them. I mean, we have things like students who are doing. We have a dancer in our program who does a lot of kind of dancing outside of work. We have students who are doing intramural volleyball. I don't know. We have like a cohort. We have a cohort of people who are playing volleyball. There are people who are doing community volunteering work. There are lots of different things that are important to them. So that's I think that balance is there, and it's again being efficient with your time and being um, and and being able to kind of handle these transitions well. I think that's very important, and we do some support for that. So, for example, we do hold sessions and talk about how you manage your time well and how you can be more efficient with your time, and how to navigate kind of all the different things that you'll be doing in the course of your training in an MD PhD program, but also your career as a physician scientist. You'll always be kind of in this environment where you'll be asked to do a lot of different things, and trying to figure out how to make that balance work well is important. Vacation time, students do get vacation time for sure. Our graduate students, for example, are unionized, and so there is very specific vacation time that's outlined in the contract for our graduate students. When you're in medical school, you get vacation time as well. And if you're interested in starting a family, for example, there's appropriate um, um, leave policies that exist there as well. So that's there, and we generally, as a program, do not monitor kind of vacation time in a very aggressive way. We know that programs are the training is really intense, and that there's a need for time off, and we're always supportive of that. Other extracurricular activities, we have a lot of student-run activities that are focused on kind of volunteer and kind of service activities and other kinds of things that our students can do together, for example, and kind of help with that. The one that we just recently finished is something that actually started during the pandemic. It's called a NSTB student service auction. Basically, our students offer different things that they do And they use this as an opportunity to raise money for different nonprofits within our community. So these are things that don't necessarily cost a lot of money for the student to kind of complete. So these would be things like baked goods. We have a lot of really great bakers in our program who bake a lot of great stuff. So things like that, or other kinds of services. We had one student, for example, who offered dancing lessons, and another student who was like, "I'll teach you how to change the oil in your car," or do those kinds of things. And so our current, I think our most recent auction raised over like $2,000 for two different kind of nonprofit organizations in town. And so it gives you a sense of kind of the types of things our students are doing outside of lab and outside of medicine that that they like to spend time doing. Yeah. So
Thank you for that. Our next question is, what's the best way of getting an MD, PhD mentor to list on our applications?
I'll try and answer this in the best way that I can, but I'm not exactly sure exactly kind of what you're asking for. So if you're like trying to find an MD, PhD student or faculty member or someone to kind of work with or to serve as a mentor for you, that I think that's really doing some outreach or trying to find get suggestions or recommendations for people that you could potentially approach to learn more about MD PhD training. So these could be faculty members, maybe at UCF or maybe at other places, or students who might be interested in serving as mentors. So there are pluses and minuses to a faculty mentor versus a student mentor. So for example, a faculty mentor kind of has gone through this process, can give you a sense of kind of what the day-to-day life of a physician scientist as a faculty member is like, but maybe it's been a while since they've applied to a program. And so a student, for example, can provide you with a little bit more information about kind of applications and kind of that process because they're closer to that, to having done that in the past. I will say one of the things that we do have, although the application deadline has passed, it will open up again in the fall, is that we do have this pre-MSTP mentoring program within our program where students in our program have set up a kind of like a 1-year kind of mentoring opportunity. So students who are interested, for example, in being paired with a current MD PhD student as a mentor can apply, and if selected, will engage in a kind of a 1-year kind of mentoring program with their assigned mentor over the course of that year. It's particularly useful for students who are kind of in the process of applying or thinking about applying because they can provide you with that kind of support as well. So that program will open up again in the fall, and we've had a lot of students who've applied. I think currently in our current year, we have about 22 mentees in that program right now. So and a pretty good track record of success of getting students into MD PhD programs through that program. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have two more questions.
Yeah.
Are clinical hours or volunteering as important compared to MD only, or are research hours productivity more valuable?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that the focus for MD PhD is really on research. So clinical hours or volunteering is important, but I think it's probably not as important as it would be for an MD only applicant. So again, the kind of the number of hours is, well, in terms of the expectation of the number of hours will really differ from program to program. In our medical school, for example, there is no requirement for shadowing, but I think there is an expectation that you will have some experience in a healthcare setting that will that you have participated in so that you're sure that you want to pursue a career in clinical medicine. But it doesn't necessarily have to be shadowing, I think. And again, the number of hours is probably not as important as sort of the approach that you take to patient care and kind of how well you kind of demonstrate that approach either in your essays or in your personal statements or during the interview. I think more important than anything else. The one volunteer activity I would say that is not in a healthcare setting that is, uh, I think that at least our committee doesn't find as helpful as scribing. Like thousands of hours of scribing is really not that helpful for an MD PhD application, I would say. Um, Research, though, is really important. And so I think in general, you can probably never have enough research experience. I think the more research experience that you can get, the better off you will be, at least from an application perspective. So if that's not there, it's really almost impossible to kind of get an interview with an MD PhD program. So the focus there is kind of on the research. And if you're doing gap years, for example, almost all the applicants who are doing gap years are doing research. Very few are doing kind of any kind of full-time clinical work. They may be doing a little bit of clinical work, but in general, it's going to be full-time research that they're engaged in. And I think it's also important for everyone here to know that about 80% of our applicant pool right now are doing gap years, right? So um, the pathway of kind of moving into an MD PhD program right out of college is like the non-traditional path right now. And so, and that's not to say that you have to do a gap year or you have to do gap years to get into a program, but most of the applicants are applying after having done a year or two or three of research after college. I'm not saying that's a good trend. I'm just kind of giving you sort of what we're seeing in terms of what the applicant pool kind of looks like at the moment.
Thank you. And this will be our final question for the workshop today. But the student is asking, when we list our experiences in the AMCAS application, should research be designated as one of our top 3 meaningful activities for additional writing space, or is it better to use another activity in that space? Because we have 10,000 characters to describe research experience in the personal statement section.
Yeah, that's a really good question and insightful one. And I would say if you don't list research as one of your top 3 meaningful activities, it will present some questions because almost every other applicant will be listing research as one of their top 3 meaningful activities. So that's what would be expected. And again, I think it is true you have the research experiences, personal statement that you can use, but it's got to be backed up also by sort of your listing research as one of your top 3 meaningful activities. I think that is expected by programs, and probably if you want like a key kind of tip or kind of thing, that's definitely one of them. Like you should be listing research as one of those top 3 meaningful activities, and you will get additional space to talk about it. Of course, that's important as well. But I think again, as I mentioned, this is a research focused kind of career path, and so it always ends up becoming like a question when we see that why didn't this applicant list research as one of their top 3 meaningful activities? So that you don't want to create that impression that you're not, committed to a research career. So,
Well, thank you, Dr. Shimizu, for all of your insights and help today. I'm going to
yeah,
ask for you to share your email one more time in the chat so that students have it.
yeah, absolutely. So if you need to contact me, please contact me at any time. Um, Happy to answer any questions that you might have. So, yeah.
And then I've also gone and posted a post-event survey. So if you enjoyed this workshop, please take a moment, excuse me, to fill out our survey. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us directly at aap@ucf.edu. And for more resources, I posted our Linktree link as well. But thank you all again for your participation. Thank you, Dr. Shimizu, for your insights, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.